Ladies and gentlemen, good morning or good afternoon from India and good morning or good evening wherever you are in the world. Unfortunately, the person who was to conduct the next talk, he has been unable to come due to an unexpected emergency. So I will conduct this talk instead. Mr. James Gorton, I hope you are there.
Hello. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon.
Morning, good evening. It's good afternoon here. Good afternoon to you and good morning in the UK.
Okay, thank you very much for having me.
Anyway, Mr. James Gorton, our next speaker, works for the Statfold Narrow Gauge Museum, a charitable trust started in 2018 by Graham Lee, whose sole purpose was to maintain the railways, museum, and Statfold collection through the ages. James have been actively involved at Statfold for over 10 years as a volunteer and a paid member of staff. He has had an interest in the railways for as long as he can remember, often being found driving 7¼ gauge miniature steam locomotive in the garden of his grandparents from a very early age. At Statfold, he not only helps to ensure the railways and locomotives are maintained and operated safely throughout the year, but also promotes the heritage and museum aspects of the site. James acts as liaison between the trust at Statfold and other museum trusts elsewhere, as well as with government departments. As I said, Mr. Gorton, you were to be introduced by Mr. Ranjit Wildi, but unfortunately he has not been able to come. So please excuse me for the very brief introduction. I'm sure you would have had a more detailed introduction. Anyway, it's over to you. It's over to you.
Right. So I apologise to everyone now. I don't really do Zoom meetings and my technology can be traced back to Steam days. So I will try my hardest. So if I share that. So can everyone see? So you are screen sharing. So yeah, so I work for what's known as the Statfold Narrow Gauge Museum Trust. And we are a charitable trust that was set up by Graham. And we manage Statfold and the Statfold Barn Railway. So really, as a railway and museum, our heritage is more the engines than the railway itself, because the railway itself has only been in existence since 2003. But the oldest engine that we've got in a steamable condition dates back to 1884. So whereas other railways, such as the Festiniog Railway, the Welsh Highland Railway in Wales, the Linton and Barnstable Railway in England, them railways have got their history can be dated back a long time. So the heritage is in the actual railway and the railway locomotives, as more comes from the collection. So can everyone see my screen? Is there a PowerPoint on it?
Yeah. Please go ahead.
Brilliant. So the beginnings, like it says there, it all started in 2003. The first line went around Graham's private garden, and since that it's grown to one of, we've got, I think it's over 75 engines in the collection. It's between 75 or 80. So it's has now, we keep 20 steam engines in operational condition. So they've all got their boiler tickets on them. We're at the moment going through the process of ticketing them. We've got the last Burton Ashby tram, which was a local 3'6" gauge tram that went to Detroit, ran a heritage service, but we'll go through all that. So so I'm in a fortunate position that we were one man's collection. Then he set up the charitable trust. So where the Garden Railway, where it all started, I show some pictures around. That is and still is Graham's private garden. So out of this small railway that crossed the causeway, it sort of grew up then into the fields, out the fields. The first engine in the collection was a motor rail simplex 2' gauge that was worked for the Somerset Water Board, dredging lakes and rivers. So from that there, so this is the auspices of the garden. You can just see sort of the overhead shot there. You can do what looks like a footpath around past the ornamental garden is the railway. And the two pictures show the original signal box and the engine shed, which is still there, and going across the causeway. So that's the early years. That's the really early years of our railway and museum. There's a little diesel crossing the lake there. There's a little wren outside the engine shed. Vertical boiler. And then the Garden Railway now has sort of developed and matured from them early years. So we're looking 20 years ago now when it all started. So it's gone. There's been some modification, branch lines taken out. So in that respect, it's still very much as it was, but with a little bit of subtle changes. That's the Garden as we see it now. So we've got Rishra, the little Bagley that was built up the road here at Burton, came on loan from us from the Leighton Buzzard Railway, and that's our little wren on the picture on the right that worked at the Imperial Smelting Company in Avonmouth in Bristol, built in 1918, but then went across to Canada and was preserved by Charles Matthews, and we bought it back from Canada. So that's the auspices of the Garden Railway. So moving on to that, the railway. So we're in Graham's farm. We sit on the farmland. So on that farmland, there's 4 railways that can be operated on site. So we've got the original Garden Railway and the original Field Railway. So the Field Railway was born out of the fact that when Graham retired from LH Plant, which was the company he ran, his children bought him a leaving present, which was the 1945 built Peckett Harrogate that had worked at Harrogate Gasworks, had gone to the Festiniog Railway, and then had been restored by the Bredgar and Wormshill Railway, but it was a bit too big for Bredgar, so it come on the market, so we purchased it. So you've got the original Field Railway, and we also purchased Tranquil at the same time from Indonesia, Java, and we bought that back, and that was the last commercially built steam engine in the UK in 1971. So you've got the Garden Railway, the Field Railway, you've got the High Line, and then you've also got the tramway. The tramway is a multi-gauge railway that's 3-foot gauge, and with a 18-inch as well, but it basically can also do 4 foot 8.5. So we do run small standard gauge engines on it as well. So Statfold Junction is a complex signalling system because it's probably one of the busiest signal boxes in operation on a heritage railway in the UK, because it signals every move in and out of the station. But every time a train comes into the station, then you have to have another engine to release the engine that's pulled the train in. So an engine will come onto the train and then take it out. So that's in essence, the railways sort of add to the spectacle of the museum. They weren't there as in any industrial purpose. They're there to demonstrate the engine. So a journalist in this described it, called it a spectacle of steam, which I thought was quite nice. He said it's a theatre of steam that you've got sharp gradient, sharp corners, you've got steep gradients, you can really hear engines working. On our enthusiast days, which are very much like our gala days, we operate a mixture of freight trains and passenger trains to sort of demonstrate what these things would have actually worked. So most of the journeys when you come to site start at Statfold Junction. It's got a high level and low level station. Originally it was only built as a low level station. It's on a 1 in 37 bank, so it's quite a steep gradient into the station. So it generally means the engines are working hard all the way into the station, and then that they stop when you come to the end of the railway with you. But they're working all the way through the station, so it gives people a very good spectacle when they first start, when you hear a steam engine coming at full chat, basically. So initially, can be seen at the top of the site in 2006. At the lower part, you see the shed, which is the running shed, which is still largely the same as it was, with the lines outside that. There's a standard gauge sort of head shunt that comes out and round, and the original railway comes up to a station to the left of that lower shed. That's 2006. The railway continues to grow and improve. We built many stations after that, and we continue to lay more railway, build more railways. So the next one was this is the original station at the top, and it was only a very short station. And in all truth, it wasn't used for very, very long, but it was used, so nonetheless is an important part of the story. So that shows Harrogate, the Peckett on the right. That was built for Harrogate Gasworks, and the engine on the left in the station is the Tranquil number 4, which, like I said, was built in 1971 for the Tranquil sugar mill. This then shows 2007. So in a year after that, we then moved the station down and then put a bay platform in. And you can see then that the goods train is between the new station and the original station. And then 6 years later in 2013, not much had changed. You've got the advent of the goods sidings, where the turntable, small turntable, was built to stable the goods stock. And then you've got the sidings that have been put in for the standard gauge. So this is one of the second station with the bay platform. That shows 1945 built Bagnall Isabutu that had worked in South Africa and had been returned to the UK, I think in the 60s, 70s. And we bought then off the railway at Toddington, the 2-foot gauge railway at Toddington. So at this point, the railway, which I failed to mention, is a dual gauge 2-foot and 2-foot-6 gauge railway. So the Pakis Baru mill engines that we bought back from Indonesia, they were 2-foot-6, so the railway was laid as a dual gauge. 2016 shows the construction of the new station, which is the bay platform is now extended all the way to the new turntable with the high level put in. And this then was when the 2-foot-6 was taken out because there was operational challenges with the dual gauge point. So as we were running more in terms of operating days, more trains, bigger trains, that the 2-foot-6 multi-gauge points were taken out, and we were primarily then 2-foot. So the 2-foot-6 gauge engines are in the museum building, but they are in a runnable condition, so we could put new 10-year tickets on them, and if we had a railway that was 2-foot-6, we could run them. That shows it in 2017 with the final development of the last carriage shed on the right between the gardens and the station building. So this shows the Bagley built Rishra in the station under the bridge. So the bridge is a mix and match of new and old. So parts of it of the stanchions are from old station buildings where we bought the cast iron columns, and then Track Systems UK were then contracted to build the bridge and put the new embellishments on top, so the actual footbridge itself. Even for example, for our heritage I talked about earlier, you can see the station lamp is a cast iron column, and so that came from Birmingham City Council. They were selling them off in the 50s and 60s, but that came to our site via Canada from the Charles Matthews collection. So even though Birmingham's just 20 miles up the road from Statfold, it travelled via Canada to get here because Charles Matthews Senior was an avid collector and he bought them. And when Charles Matthews Jr. Sold us the Quarry Hunsfords back to this country to us, we bought his lorries back and we filled the container with other items, and they were one of them. So it's an interesting story that even the street lamps have been across the world. That shows the Bagnall Kidbrooke coming into the station with number 19, our Hudswell Clark. So Kidbrooke had come on its holidays. So that's Kidbrooke. She was built for, I think, a military contract in the 1918, and then was sold off and to a quarry, I believe. And number 19 is our engines. That's a Hudswell Clark built engine that ran in Fiji. That ran from the sugar factory to the docks, basically pulling the finished product. So that's why it was never fitted with a spark arrestor, even though the majority of the engines on Fiji had balloon stacks. That shows Fiji. That's another Fijian sugar engine that we bought back. That features its balloon stack, and that's Isabutu coming into the station past the signal box. So every train that comes in has to have then an engine to release it. So if we run 2 trains, then we have to run 3. We have 3 engines in steam to release the engine that's just come in. So that's outside. That shows our oldest steam engine, which is the Corpay. So 1884 built engine, built in Paris, built for a Spanish coal mine, and we bought it from Spain and imported it. And that shows number 19 again outside, waiting to come and release an engine that's come on shed, so they'll go on the train and come out. That was the signal box was built here, and all the signals were installed by Track Systems UK, and that signal box does control, like I said earlier, the in and out of the yard. So where a sort of most museums sort of count themselves as displays in a building, the whole site can be seen as a museum because it's built to showcase the engines and how they run. Oak Tree and the grain store. So Oak Tree holds the midpoint of the railway and is such as the primary passing point. We have a large building. This is the primary museum building now. Originally, 20 years ago or 15 years ago, it was, we had sheep in here giving birth, and it was very much a farm building. And over the years, it's grown. We've got a cafe in there now. It's an events hall. It's what it's grown into. This is also the terminus of the frequent gauge tramway and the 18-inch gauge. So that shows it now in 2021. So the farm building is the big green building. That's the museum building. We've got buildings on top of that. You can see the black roofs where it's outdoor storage. And the Oak Tree halt is the passing loop here at the bottom. That's primarily where we pass. So this was when the railway was being built. So that's the oak tree that the station is named after, because the station was built around that oak tree. So that was when the railway was being put in. So that's that. We like I said, we're in our own farm. So it's the farm buildings at the back are ours. So we're fortunate in that position where we can build the railway around the farm, and that's how we showcase the engines. So as a working railway as well, we've also taken the crops in. So we've got grain silo wagons that we've used for obviously bringing grain in. So this is when they're harvesting, because on site there's also a seed oil business, and the seed oil business basically processes the seeds. So strawberry seeds, they crush the strawberry seeds to get the essence of strawberry out for beauty products. So that's what they do. So they do a lot of that. So that's again shows Tranquil number 4. So this is the early years of the railway. At the harvest, it shows Tranquil number 4, which, like I said, was the last commercially built steam engine in the UK in 1971. There's an interesting story which we'll talk about later with Tranquil, that and it's a true story, that they're Hunslet were asked to build a steam engine, and they went down to see what parts they got left over, if they could fulfil the contract or not. And they said, yeah, we've got enough parts to build you a steam engine. They got the parts of a Brazil class, so that's what they built, and that's why Tranquil exists. So this is sort of midway through the railway's building and progression. So that's a 2-foot gauge Malay. So that's an articulated form of engine that ran at the Jatiribang sugar mill in Indonesia. It's one of the engines we bought back from Indonesia. Well, we bought from Indonesia. We bought Tranquil back, and we bought, when Graham went to Indonesia, he realised that was probably the last time to be able to get engines out, and he said it was a very surreal place at the time, because you could see like workers had left on the Friday. There was wheel sets dropped out of engines, tools lying about, and obviously the mill had closed and they'd not come back to work on the Monday. So he said you could go into engine sheds where engines were halfway through having wheel sets dropped out, and you could see all people's tools everywhere. So the fact that they'd never gone back to work. So he realised now that these engines were being scrapped, and this was the time to, with the advent of the sugar mills moving from rail to move the crop into tractors and lorries, and then also motorising around the mills, it was time to see what you could get out of Indonesia. So we brought back Tranquil, and he brought back 5 or 6 at the same time of mainly German built engines. So that's an Arn Young, that they think that's probably the last German built Malay. That's also ran on the Welsh Highland Railway. We took that up to the Welsh Highland. So the railways continued. So after leaving Oak Tree, halt both railways of the 2-foot, skirt the field and head towards the balloon loop. So the railway finishes in a balloon loop, so you don't have to run round, or you have to have an engine to release you, so it comes back. So here is the Cogan halt. This is the last station on the line, and there are hand signals provided at these and at the balloon loop and at Oak Tree on the busy days when we need to pass lots of trains. So the German built Kraus of 1899, I think off the top of my head, that worked at the Shraggy sugar mill, and we bought that back. Well, bought that along with Max to this country, and Max is an Ornstein and Koppel, and in the background is a 2'6". You can see the outer rails. That's the 2'6", and you can just see the 2'6" gauge multi-gauge point. So at that point, stock was a combined gauge of 2 foot and 2'6". So, and then we have also we have visiting engines. So last year we did so because it's quite interesting really, because we're not a heritage railway per se, is in that our history is relatively new. We're only 20 years old, which is quite rare in terms of railways. That a lot of emphasis is placed on our engines for the history and what we do. So we tend to theme the enthusiast days. So the one in June last year was what we called Sweet Indian Steam. So it was our Hudswell Clark Alpha worked at the Bihar State Sugar Factory in Ryam, and that was 100 last year. So as part of that celebrations, we spoke to Adrian Shooter, who was the I think the president of the Darjeeling Himalayan Railway Society, and we borrowed 19B off him for the event. And part of that is we had a photo charter, and this photo charter shows us and with 19B of our stock in the field at the end of the railway. So on that, we worked quite closely with the Darjeeling Himalayan Railway Society. They sold samosas on the station, chai tea. It was all about showcasing sort of Indian steam. They brought in, well, the Darjeeling Railway Society railway. They brought in lots of photos. We had photo collages. We had models of Indian steam engines. It was a fantastic thing. To be fair, it was a good day, and it was we were on the 19B, and Adrian came along. That was a really good day from us. So So we will talk about the engines in a minute. We'll see some photos, but we've got a number of engines that ran in India. So it was to showcase our Indian engines and showcase Indian narrow gauge steam railways. So that's why we worked with Darjeeling Himalayan Railway Society, and we still do. So some of their archives are on site, their photos, and we work quite closely with them if they need anything. So that's 19B, and it's a very nice engine to drive, I will say that. That's our tram. So the tram has had an interesting existence. So Burton and Ashby are only 9 and probably 15 miles from this site. So it ran between the two. It was operated by a railway company, which was very rare for trams. Tramways were usually privately owned or owned by the corporation and the city. But it was owned by the Midland Railway. It didn't last long as a tramway, but it ran through the countryside setting between Burton and Ashby, took farmers to work and that kind of thing. But it remained as a model railway club until the 70s, and in the 70s it was then sold to Detroit, the city of Detroit, and then it was sold and restored. It went to Detroit in the 1980s, in the early 1980s, and was regauged to 3 foot, and it actually operated a heritage tramway in Detroit for a number of years, but Detroit went bankrupt as a city when they lost the car industries. So it was put into store for 10 years. And then after 10 years of being in store, the city needed to raise money. So they sold off their assets, basically. So the city sold off their assets in terms of you could buy a police car, but you had to buy a lot of 100 police cars in the auction. So it came to our knowledge that the tram was sort of for sale and sort of being threatened in the fact that, well, not threatened, but its existence was now questioned where it would land up or how it would be. So we went across to Detroit to the auction. The tram was purchased at auction by Graham himself. He went over. He went then to the city yard to get the tram out of storage, and the city worker said, "You're not coming in." He said, "We haven't been paid in months, so unfortunately you can't get your tram." I think it was a little bit less unpolite than that, but so he said, right. So he rang the auctioneers, and the auctioneers' attitude was very much that buyer beware, you should have found this out before you bought it. There's nothing I can do. So Graham went across and in his usual resolve sort of said, well, what's this going to cost me? What do you want to get? What do I need to get my tram? And he landed up buying every worker there breakfast. And I think it cost him about $2,500–3,000 in breakfast just to get into the yard. So he could then bring the tram out. So we then shipped the tram to Canada. It was then split in half, the top deck taken off, and a frame was built then to bring it back deck freight from Canada on a ship. So the next photo is the tram in Detroit, still carrying its sort of original guise of the Burton and Ashby colour scheme, but with the yellow pages of Detroit, Discover Detroit written on the top. So that's how it ran in Detroit, and it was quite successful. And as you can see, it ran with another heritage tram at the same time. That's the tram. So on the tramway, like I talked about, is the 18-inch gauge. That's the little 18-inch gauge jack built by Hunslet for Jack Knowles's tramway in Woodville. So it's another local engine. That engine isn't owned by us, but is on long-term loan. So it's owned by Armley Mills. So the city of Leeds, it belongs to them, and they've loaned that to us, and we run that on its own little tramway. So it's not been used in a couple of years, but we've returned that to steam now. So that'll be running at the next open day. So that's quite important to us because the two have been, everything's important to you. You're a museum. We love the things that we've got, but they're important for our local visitors because they sort of show and tie the local connection from between us and the local area, because of, like I sort of reiterate that we're a young railway, so we've got no real industrial heritage. We were never built for a purpose of moving people, moving goods around, moving products around a site. It was very much to showcase the spectacle of the engines that we own. So in the museum, that's in the former grain store. So the Statfold collection, we've got, like I said, I think it's between 75 and 80 engines now. We're a Visit England accredited museum, so we've gone through an external accreditation process. We've got audio and visual displays that help the public to learn about the engines, and people learn about the engines in very surreptitious ways. So, for example, we do Christmas events, which I've got a photo of, but the exit to the grottos comes out in all the engines. So basically people are walking out past the engines and looking at the steam engines as they come out. So in the museum, there is the roundhouse. So there's 24 tracks emanate from a central turntable, and that is best viewed from the railway, from the balcony. You can overlook all the tracks, and it is some spectacle. It even still takes my breath away after all the years I've been here. I go in and I look, and it fascinates me to see still, as you can see in my photo, that's the back of the museum. So that's taken from that gallery. So we are a narrow gauge railway, as I said, and we are predominantly, all of the engines were built for industry. Let me just take a glass of sip of water. So whereas most railways like the Festiniog, they've got passenger carrying in their blood, we haven't. So it's quite hard for us to tell the story of passenger carrying railways. So we work with the Darjeeling Railway Society, and they created these display boards for us that are up in our museum building where the engines are kept. And we think this showcases sort of obviously the passenger carrying narrow gauge railways, but also it's a very good showcase for the Darjeeling Railway, because it shows, there's a route map that shows how much elevation it climbs in such a short distance, and it's just, and you see people going to view it, they read it, and then there's leaflets then for the Darjeeling Himalayan Railway Society, and hopefully then that helps them to build up a following as well via our visitors, because whereas we have railway visitors, we also have not railway visitors, so like the general public that come for the soft play that we have on site for the climbing walls and everything like that. So it builds up that understanding, and that's the other side of the museum, the display in the museum. So we feel that showcases sort of the environment that a narrow gauge railway can actually run in, and the harsh realities of it. When you see the photo on the railway on the ledge on the side of the mountain, you tell people that's what they run across, and the landslips that you could see with the road. And this was the only way up to Darjeeling at one point. It fascinates people when you talk about it. So, as I said, we have there are two Bihar sugar engines, so they worked at Ryam. So you've got an American-built Davenport, which is the black engine on the right, and that's Alpha. That's our Hudswell Clarks. That's a Leeds-built engine. And that was the engine that was 100 last year, so that's why we celebrated 100 years of that engine's birthday, basically, by having the Sweet Indian Steam event. So them are the two engines that we helped to help us as a railway to showcase Indian railways. And also it shows the differences quite subtly in the designs between a very British design and a very American design, where you've got bar frames, a bell, a big cab, and then plate frames and a very English Hudswell Clark built engine. So that's another view of the roundhouse. That's the engines on the turntable around. So, like I said, the majority of the engines in there, 20 of them are kept in ticket. So we run up to 20 steam engines, but 20 of our steam engines can run. And at our enthusiast day that we've got on the 18th of March, I think we're due to run 15 steam engines on that day. So I don't think there's many other railways or museums that could run 15 of their own engines. So in that respect, we are quite proud of that. And we try and maintain the engines in the best condition we can. We have regular volunteers that come in and clean them, because you have to be a spectacle for when the general public come in. So people enter the museum through that roundhouse, and you can hear people go wow as they come in. So we still want to have that wow factor, and we still want returning guests to have that wow factor. So this year we've gone through a change somewhat in where engines are kept around the turntable. So we've grouped engines together, where in terms of where they were built, who they worked for, and where they worked. So we've got the Indian engines are kept together now. The Javan engines are kept together. That the Penryn Quarry engines, that were the engines that worked in the Penryn Quarry in North Wales, the 5 of them are kept together. And then there's a corner of 4 built Bristol engines. So you've got 2 Pecketts and 2 Avensides. So we are really proud of it, and we try and tell the story of where the engines run. So where we bought engines back. So we bought the engines back from Fiji, from the Cameroon, from India, from the engines that worked in South Africa that we didn't bring back, but that they've come back via to us, and that's where they work. So it's important for us to tell that story to children and families and the enthusiasts, but the enthusiasts will know it more than them, that these engines were working engines, and they were there for a reason, and they did work for that very reason. And we want to show them that what they would have pulled. So I'll show you when but we do a guidebook, and in that guidebook it shows the restored engines and also the engines where they worked. So we find that really important, because it's all very well these people thinking these engines are all shiny, and we get the questions that says, oh, did you just repaint it? Did you get it like that? But as you can just see in the back of them photos, in that photo, there's a Tamar, Hunslet built Tamar, and a Baldwin built 460 and that's both how engines arrive here. When Fiji arrived, the engine on the turntable, which you'll see in a minute, that arrived in a pretty appalling condition. The fact that while it had ran in Fiji on a tourist railway, it had had its diesel engine cut out, and it was predominantly used as a diesel engine, as with a hydraulic motor down into the middle set of wheels. So we've restored that to run in order. So we've got Michael and King of the Scarlets that you can see there. They're 2 Hunslet built quarry engines that ran at the Norwich quarry in North Wales. So the Norwich and Penryn were next door to each other, separated by the mountain. And they are, as they left the quarry. So Charles Matthews Senior, who was a collector in Canada, bought them in the 60s and taken them straight to Canada. So they're up on the mezzanine level, and that shows the engines as they came out of Canada. So they'll never be restored, because in the best way in the world, there's a lot of restored quarry Hunslets, but there's not many that show engines in their working guises of how they were. So them engines, you can see the patch on the smoke box. They've got well, the engine, one of the engines we bought back with them had cement in the bottom of the smoke box, so there was obviously a leak, so they just loaded in. It worked in a cement works, so they just bailed a load of cement in the bottom of it. So these engines are very important, and they highlight that story for us, and they're there for people to see in that respect. So like we talked about Christmas, so we do a Christmas event. So we get, by hook or by crook, that basically this trust will survive. So we do non-railway focused events. So Christmas, we do Halloween, we do fireworks, and all of that is done. So we can get money to look after these engines, because maintaining engines in a running condition is an expensive business. There's always things to buy. There's coal to buy. Coal's now, we paid £200 a tonne last year. Coal is now £475 a tonne this year. So it's gone over double the price. So we've got to take money off people. So in terms of that, this trust will always sustain the engines by whatever means it can. And that will be by getting people through the door. It will be by doing events that aren't railway focused. So we are labelled, rightly or wrongly. People say, oh, Statfold's become a theme park now, because we've got a soft play, we've got climbing walls, we've got at the moment a roller skate rink. But you have to, railways have to become more than just a railway, really. For people to stay and for railways to earn the money, we all saw during the COVID pandemic that railways were that had banked through the year and then spent it during the winter. When their seasons were hit at the start of the year, it was a moment. There was a worry for a lot of railways, and you had to cut cloth accordingly. But by hook or by crook, we will get money in that respect, and we will fund ourselves. So people go, oh, you've become a theme park, but I think it's necessary. And the trust view is that we have to diversify what we do. So we've restored a duck decoy on site, we've restored woodland, and that's part of the offering, which is not a word I use very often, but it is the offering of the museum and the railway. Are the woodland walks, is the duck decoy, is the miniature railway we're building, because you have to become more than just a railway that focuses on giving rides, because you can't become that. You have to do other things. So that's by what we're doing. So that also shows that the 2-foot 6-gauge engines, one's up against the wall on display on an old 2-foot gauge wagon. So that's another wow factor when people see that. So that's one of the Pakistan Baru sugar engines that we brought back from Java. So it's, from our point of view, it's really interesting, and we do these things because we have to and we want to. And it also shows the engines to a wider market. So if we can keep doing that and we can keep bringing people in, then that's how the trust will endeavour to keep going. So the collection. So yeah, like I've talked about, the collection is the biggest part of us, and it is the thing we are the proudest about. So the collection now, it started with a 1954 rail motor, which I'll show you a picture of. Our oldest working engine is the Malay that we've seen, at 1884. And we've got the last commercially built steam engine in the UK for industry, which was Tranquil number 4. Like I said, that was built in 1971. And it's and when Graham found out that about the engine still working in Java, we bought the company. LH had bought Hunslet from its Swedish owners. So he then went across, made contact with the mill, and then went across personally to go and meet the mill owners and see what if a deal could be done, because these engines were still working at that point in the sugar mill, putting the sugar cane in, which I'll hopefully show you in a second if my technology can keep going. So that was, would you believe, the first engine in the collection. So that's a 1954 rail motor. So from little acorns grow big collections, big trees, as they say, big trees. So that's the first engine. It shows the railway in its first occupancy at the top. So that's outside the shed. So then hopefully, if I can, I'll try and share another video. So hopefully this will work. I apologise, I am not the most Zoom person. New share, so just loading the video. It's just loading. Sorry.
The video hasn't come yet.
No, it's just 99% complete. I apologise. I know steam engines like the back of my hand, but I'm not very good on a computer. I struggle with my mobile as well. It's one of them. just still downloading. I don't know what it's downloading. So yeah, so Tranquil is an important engine to us, and they all are. But that, especially for us, because it's a very historic engine. It is the last. I think I know there's a chap speaking from Barrow Hill, so he'll be able to correct me if I'm wrong. But I think steam on the main line had been banned from about 3 years previously at this point. So there was a complete ban on main line steam in the UK. But Hunslet produced its last steam engine for that sugar mill in Java, and it was because they burned bagasse. So bagasse is the byproduct of the sugar. So I'm hoping. So we create videos, and John Raby is a good friend of the trust. So he created this video for us. He'd seen Tranquil working in India, in Indonesia. That shows the bagasse, what they burned on the engine. So bagasse was the byproduct. It was after they crushed the cane. It was the remnants of the cane. So as you can hear, the timing's very out on it at this point.
James, unfortunately, the sound is not coming through. You can see the video, but that's okay. Don't worry about it.
Is he sanding the track?
Yeah, sanding the track, yeah. It was also fitted, as built, it had got backhead injectors, but they found they got very hot, so they fitted a water pump additionally on the side as well. We still got the water pump in storage. There's more bagasse piled on it. But we feel videos like this are very important for us, and because it highlights how the engine works with the general public. So we have these on display around the museum. So when people come in, they can see works photos of it being built, the photos of it in Java, but they've got this video then that they can see the actual engines working. By the early 2000s, they'd stopped using the railways to go to the fields. So the railways were only predominantly used around the mills. They started bringing in the cane by lorries, which is then why the railways then become obsolete to a degree, and the engines did.
When was this video shot?
I've watched this video hundreds of times and I still find it fascinating. Every time I watch it, you just. Oh, crap. So I've done something wrong here. Right. So I'm a bit, I know we've got time pressure, so I'll carry on through that. And what I can do is I can see if I can send any videos to you so you can watch them amongst yourselves. I can see if I can do a WeTransfer, then you can send them out to your society.
No, unfortunately, I haven't got anything from him, but there are a few questions which we can certainly ask you.
Yeah, I'll just finish off then and we'll go through some questions. Yeah. So in the collection, we've got the first commercially, the first Garrett on loan to us from the Welsh Highland Railways. That's Bay of Peacock K1. So went to Tasmania. The railway was finished with it. Bay of Peacock became aware of that and wanted to buy the works plate, but the Tasmanian railway engineer convinced them to buy the whole engine. So that's why that engine survived. When Bay of Peacock closed, I believe it was either donated or the Welsh Highland Railway, well, the Festiniog Railway then purchased it for them, for the Festiniog Railway, with a view to changing it. They never did. And then eventually it ran on the Welsh Highland and came to us after a period of not being used. That's my favourite engine, so that's why that's in here. So that's our Fowler. That ran, it's called Saccharin, so it ran at a sugar mill, Saccharin, it should be pronounced. It ran at a sugar mill in South Africa on the Mount Edgecombe Estates, and it came back to this country as and ran at a railway in Scotland, and eventually moving to us. And we've just done the 10-year ticket last year on that, finished that. So that's in steam for another 10 years. Everyone says it's very ugly, but I think it's very pretty. So I've got one quick video to show you. This is Fiji, and there's a question I saw which I want to talk about, but there was a really important question that someone raised on the other one about YouTube, and I'm a big believer of YouTube and social media because I think it sort of opens up you or us as a trust to anywhere in the world, because it's a fascinating thing. And I really think, and railways do embrace them and we embrace them. And there's a chap that said that there's a chap that there's video bloggers that do great Indian railway ones, and you should get them to do a talk. And I think YouTube and social media is massively the way forward. So we started, and we've dropped off a bit, but we did some videos for our YouTube channel, and this is one of them. So this is about Fiji, and it's only 3 minutes long, so it's a great bit of video.
Statfold Barn Railways Video Collection Series, where we take you behind the scenes here at Statfold to explore our wonderful collection of narrow gauge locomotives. In this episode, we're going to take a closer look at one of the largest locomotives here at Statfold. Talk about this locomotive, that's known as Fiji. It's a ability featured in the previous episode. Fiji was also built for sugar cane. Sugar Refining Company Limited to the Fiji Mill, once the largest sugar mill in Spain, owned the BT11 in Fiji. Completed by Statfold Company Limited to the Bees on February 20th, 1912, as works under 972. Fiji was on a free 2-foot gauge notice loads more than the previous year, to shift half of the sugar cane from the bean to the mill, where it's processing sugar. The reason for Fiji's large size is because the sugar cane in both is sufficient coal and water capacity to make non-stop runs up to 40 miles, loaded trains weighing up to 300 tons, through its 82-mile peak. Fiji's design was derived from a pair of Mosaic toe types built by Statfold for the Colonial Sugar Refining Company the previous year, and a total of 18 locomotives were built for the company to Fiji's dimensions, in addition to 2 specials with smaller cylinders. The design was later changed, with a larger boiler and 10-inch diameter cylinders, and a total of 14 of these later locomotives were built up to 1952. As built, Fiji had a variable blast pipe to allow for better combustion of different fuel types, as Fiji engine pathways were originally designed to run on coal, and they were all fitted with double skin blades in an attempt to dissipate some of the sun's blatant heat. Fiji wasn't limited to hauling cane trains, and could also be found pulling passenger services as well. Alas, the Toka's long-distance cane trains were taken over by diesels from the 1950s onwards. Most of the steam locomotives were withdrawn and scrapped during the 1960s. Happily, Fiji survived, and after a period out of service, was returned to steam in 1978 to haul a special train of dignitaries to mark the mill's 75th anniversary. Subsequently preserved, things took a turn for the worse in 1995 when Fiji was fitted with a diesel engine for use on the Coral Coast Railway's tourist train, which involved cutting parts of the border of firebox, greatly complicating the challenge of returning this fascinating locomotive to steam. But that didn't stop the team here at Statfold. Repatriated to Britain in 2011, Fiji arrived at Statfold in October 2010. After a thorough restoration and rebuild, which involved heavy repairs to its severely cracked frames, it returned to steam in February 2014. Since then, Fiji has been one of Statfold's most popular locomotives and has even visited the Ffestiniog Highland Galleries in Wales, where it was named Fiji by His Excellency Mr. Solo Mara, the Fijian High Commissioner to the United Kingdom. And there's another Exeter Oakenmill locomotive here at Statfold, at 12 o'clock in summertime 2019, which we'll look at in another video. Thanks for watching. And if you've enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.
So yeah, so we find them really important, and we feel personally, and I feel very personally about it, that the YouTube is a big thing now. When you look at the Tank Museum at, I think it's Bovington, they've got 500,000 followers on YouTube, and it's fascinating. So that's what we do. So I'll just quickly rattle through some aware at the time. That's our Hudswell Clark Alpha in the mill at India. So we use photos like that in the guidebook, and we always try and I can't remember the photographer's name, so I can't credit him, and I feel really bad for that. But he's a really nice bloke, and he sent us these photos that he'd taken at the mill. And and there's a couple more I'll show you in a sec. That we feel it's really good because it shows in the background. It's not just about the engine. You've got what's happening, how they work, where they would have worked, the people that would have operated them. It's all the stories of everything, not just the engine, if you will. So that's Alpha today outside our signal box. So then you've got the Davenport and the Baldwins at the same mill. So the Davenport came here, and somebody I saw in the questions said about, well, we'll talk about that. It's all a balancing act of how you restore something, because you're right. How do you determine how you can restore something, or what should you restore? Because are you then taking away the heritage of it because you've restored it? And it is a balancing act of restoration versus conservation. So there are engines that we haven't restored for that reason, but engines have got to live, really, because if they don't live, then you're not really telling that story. So we've got engines here that we won't restore because you take too much of the original fabric out of it, but sometimes that fabric's too far gone. So that's the Davenport. The next photo that's here sat on a wagon. So that was after we arrived here. So we'd had to, before it had come back, there was a tree that had grown through it. So either side of the tree had been cut. So we had to remove the tree as a first instance. We retained the original cab. So we do have the original cab still in that condition. But we restored that engine. So it's that's it today. So that's as it's seen on our railway outside the signal box, waiting to go onto a train by the look of it. And that's in its Ryam Sugar Company #1 in the black with the big American lamp on the front. So yes, so somebody talked about we're a charitable trust, and we were a private collection, but now we are a charitable trust. So we came into existence in 2018. The charity was set up by Graham Lee to make sure the collection and the museum wasn't sold off after his death. So there's 9 or 10 trustees, with Graham being a trustee and also the chairman. So there's a number of core paid staff that we look after the engines. We restore engines and maintain engines, and also help to look after the grounds. So that's Graham. That's our chairman. That's whose collection it was. We are lucky in terms that he is a wealthy man, but he spends all of his time here on site. He goes on 1 holiday a year, and his sole focus is this railway and this museum. And he said he will do anything to get people through the door. So people can say he can be a bit controversial, he can be opinionated, but he does it all to make sure this collection goes past his day and that people see the collection. So the future, we've just built a miniature railway that we ran for the first time and will be opening to the public on the 18th. That's a 12.25 gauge railway. What the main aim of that is obviously to be an attraction, but to bring kids in so we can, younger members, because it's like 16, 18, 21 as the youngest, the minimum age is, the 12.25 potentially will be 12 potentially. We've got to look at it, but we're hoping that. And if families want to bring, if dads want to come and bring younger kids, they can. So we need to, as somebody eloquently put it, that everyone in your society may be over 50. I don't want to assume anything, but so we're trying to get the age down. We've bought an engine back the other year from Australia, so that's our little 12.25 gauge engine. She's built in 2007 by the Exmoor Steam Railway, so she's relatively new. It's all off the shelf parts. So it's all roller bearings, it's all bits that are easy to obtain. You're not having to machine white metal, brass, bronze or anything like that. It's roller bearings, all take-up bearings, like not plumber fittings, but commercially available ball valves and everything like that. That was C4, which was the engine we bought back from Australia. That was the last one. And that's it. So any questions? I'll stop sharing now and go back onto camera. So I hope that was okay. I've not really done one of these before. So
anyway, thank you very, very much. It was a very enlightening talk. I wish we could maintain our museums in the same way and our heritage railways in the same way. I have only one question.
Yeah.
Are you self-sustaining or are you dependent on funding by some other agency or some corporate or something?
No. So we don't go for any public funding. It's all through ticket sales. We like I said, we have a benefactor in terms of Graham, but the museum has to self-fund itself. So in terms of that, that's why you have to look, because at some point governments aren't going to be able to give money out left, right and centre, because there's going to be a bit where social care and people's health will come before museums. So, and that's right. That's people's health has to come before that. So as a trust, the aim is to be self-sustainable. So it is about that. So we do weddings, we do companies come here and have AGMs, like annual general meetings, have conferences, and it's really for us as a trust to make this work in terms of that, because we want everyone to come in and see the engines, and we love it. We love when kids come in and you see people, when you hear people go in the roundhouse and they go, wow, it's just amazing, and you're showing families around and you talk to them. So yeah, we don't, but we try. It's all through ticket income, so that's why we do all different events. Fireworks, they bring in good money for us. Christmas, we move 1,000 people, 1,200, 1,300 people a day on the railway at Christmas. So
there are many comments which are all complimentary and all very positive, but since we've run out of time, we will not be able to read them all.
Okay.
Anyway, thank you very much. I must say your talk was most appreciated. All the comments are very positive.
Good. As long as everyone's happy, that's the main thing.
And on my next visit to the UK, I'll certainly come and have a look at the railway.
Yeah. If anyone's over in the UK, just drop me an email if it's not available.
I plan to come not this year but next year.
Yeah, well, you just drop me an email and I'll show you around myself.
Okay.
And that goes for everyone in your railway society. When you come over, I can just come over. We can show you around. We can show you everything.
Anyway, thanks very much.
Yeah,
and I'll certainly remain in touch.
Thank you very much.